Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Magnifying HR Voices. Wednesday gets here so quickly. I don't know what happens, but time just flies when you are having fun. My name is Julie Turney, and I am your host for today's show of Magnifying HR Voices. And what a show I have for you! Today, we're talking about redefining HR. Why is that important? Because of everything that's happening around us today, it's really important for us to understand how we as HR professionals can continue to redefine our role and stay relevant in our profession. And to have this conversation with me today, I want to welcome Lars Schmidt to the stage. Lars, how are you doing?
Hey, Julie, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. So, I always ask everyone who is joining the live to just let us know where you're joining us from. Say hi to Lars, show some love. And in order for us to get started, as we discuss redefining HR, Lars, can you just tell everyone a little bit about your origin story? Who is Lars? How did you get here? What are you doing? And how can HR professionals benefit from the services that you're offering? I'm going to jump off screen and leave you to share your origin story.
Yeah, well, my origin story goes back to really the late 90s. Like a lot of people at the time, I fell into my career in HR. I was living in Florida. I joined a company. I knew I wanted to move to LA. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was a marketing and international business major. And so I thought I'd be getting into advertising. But one company came to my campus at Florida State University, and there's only one company that had an office in LA, and they happened to be a technical recruiting firm. So I interviewed there, got the job, kind of fell in love with recruiting, and yeah, my career has really evolved over that time. Started off doing technical recruiting, then moved into talent leadership, then moved into kind of innovation focused roles. And then about 8 years ago, I left corporate to start my own firm, Amplify. And, now I do a mix of things from HR executive search to hosting an accelerator platform to kind of help develop and support the next generation of chief people officers, to a media component as well. So host a podcast called Redefining HR, written a couple of books, cover modern HR practices for fast companies. So really kind of cutting across all those things. I try to get involved in projects that accelerate innovation in HR. That's what drives me. That's a common thread between all the kind of open source or other work that I do. And more importantly than the work stuff, I'm a dad. I've got two girls, two daughters, and an amazing wife. And so I'm based outside of DC on the East Coast, and all of that keeps me pretty busy.
Thank you so much for sharing, Lars. I'm always on mute. Great story, great experiences. And I want to talk a little bit about this amazing book. I know you've written a couple, but this one in particular I want to talk to you about: Redefining HR, transforming people teams to drive business performance. What made you decide to write this book in particular, Lars?
Yeah, I've been covering, modern HR, recruiting, talent, people, practices, et cetera, for almost a decade now through a range of different platforms. So, I started off doing blogging and speaking, and then I started writing for Forbes, and then I started writing for Fast Company, and then I started the Redefining HR podcast. So I'd been having, a lot of these conversations and kind of exploring what modern HR looks like and how that is different from maybe legacy or more transactional HR for the better part of a decade. And so for me, the driver to write a book was, while I had focused on different elements of modern HR and different stories of practitioners, I wanted to create a more cohesive narrative around what modern HR looks like. But what was really important to me is to not just write my opinion on modern HR, like that's marginally valuable, but I really wanted to spotlight practitioners. Like I'm not in that seat right now. And so I wanted to share their stories and kind of really add context to say, like, this is how modern organizations and leaders are thinking about recruiting. But it's not just theory. Like then here's actual practices of what people are doing that's making a difference. This is how, modern organizations are thinking about embedding DEI throughout their entire employee life cycle, not just recruiting. And these are some examples of what companies are doing and the impact that it's having. So it was really important for me to kind of make that real and tangible, as opposed to just like a theoretical, outsider take on the field of HR.
Yes, and definitely having that clear understanding of what the future of HR not only looks like, but understanding that the future of HR is now. It will always be now,
Yeah.
because as organizations become more dynamic and things change, we want to make sure that we're staying ahead of the times, and HR professionals need to truly be more proactive. And so, as you wrote this book, I see clearly like how you are sharing that space, but being able to also give the practice, because I find a lot of times as HR professionals, we do struggle with that, making the connection between theory and practice.
Yeah.
And so having that noted in the book really is very impressive, because a lot of times we read these books and they're just like textbooks.
Yeah, you're right. Look, there's a lot of books out there that are, an academic take on the field or an analyst take on the field. And the challenge with those books is a lot of times, in theory, it sounds great, but these are people that haven't sat in your seat in years, if ever. And so,
Mm-hmm.
there's always a bit of a, I don't know what you're writing about because I haven't seen an environment like that. Like maybe if you were building something in a lab, maybe it would look like
Mm-hmm.
that. But the on the ground reality for practitioners is very different. And so it's really important for me to write that book that really was accounted for the realities of practitioners in those roles and highlighted their stories, because I wanted it to be kind of a bridge to the future of HR. But to do that, it was important to me that it was accessible and
Mm-hmm.
relatable for practitioners who weren't just reading this like abstract awesome thing that Google did. They'd be like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I could never do that. Like, don't
Yeah.
do Google. Like, Google is Google. Like, you're not Google. So let's talk about what other. And then also the aim is, one of the things I'm very deliberate about in the book is to not talk about best practices, because I don't believe in those. I think there are proven practices, but there are so many variables that make that work and make that successful in that individual company, that the idea that it could just, port itself to somewhere else isn't realistic. So, my aim is, let me pull together as many proven practices as I can. And hopefully through that, you'll have inspiration to build
Yeah.
something similar that, isn't a replica, but maybe
Right.
is inspired or model off of some of the other practices, but then localized to your own organization.
Yeah, you'll find something in it that definitely works for you. And I love that approach too. And also for HR professionals who may be new to the space, getting an understanding of what that looks like and how they can go about setting up their organization for success without thinking big picture or big organization, but that they have practical guides. So thank you so much for sharing that. As
Yeah,
you
thank
talk,
you.
you're welcome. So, as you talk about redefining HR, one of the things that you mentioned before was about, being legacy and process driven, and how we kind of evolve HR to a more human centric, people centric approach. What are some of the things that have stood out for you throughout your career in terms of how we move that forward? What are some of the things that have been pressing for you, as to how we say to HR, look, this is why you need to stop being so process driven. This is why you need to shift this way.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm not, process is important and can be important. I think if we get so locked into process for the sake of process, that's where we shoot ourselves in the foot. And I think
Yeah.
there's in organizations and for people who've only worked with, more old school HR teams, there can be a stigma around the function, right? It can be,
Yes.
oh, HR is this, and you're the policy cops and the no police and yada, yada,
Yep.
yada. I haven't, worked in those environments. I've been really fortunate over my career where I've worked in for some amazing HR leaders. I've worked in some really progressive environments, and kind of the world that I tend to operate in tends to be much more, proactive, strategic, people centric in terms of how they view their role in the field. And so the idea of redefining HR, it's almost like taking back control of our name, of who we are. And it
Yeah.
doesn't just mean like, whether you're people ops or talent and culture or whatever. And, you can make a case for those different functions. And certainly I
Right.
have opinions on those as well. But it's not just about the name, it's about the impact. It's about how you prioritize the human elements of the work, the outcomes of the work. And again, I think that there's one of the things I try to do in the book is kind of compare and contrast, again, the legacy mindset to modern mindset. So it's things
Yeah.
like, command and control in legacy mindset to decentralize and power and empower the modern mindset. Policy for the many versus policy against the few.
You.
Right? There's some common markers that I found in my research that tend to be hallmarks of either modern or legacy teams. And so, yeah, I think it's interesting to see that evolution, and obviously going through what we are continuing to go through with, with COVID, with remote, with different conversations around social justice and inequity in both society and the workplace. Like, these are big macro societal drivers that are pushing businesses forward and pushing our field forward along with that. So we're really just getting started in this new shift towards new HR, and I'm really excited about how it's going to develop and play out over time.
Yeah, definitely. And I couldn't agree with you more that it's important for us to recognize that we need to make this shift in order for organizations to continue to thrive, to continue to grow. We as HR really need to step up our game and get a better understanding of what it is that our organization needs, and making sure that we create the best spaces possible for people to thrive in that workforce. But what you're saying almost sounds somewhat utopia-ish for a lot of people, because, and here's why I say that, because at the end of the day, while you've had the privilege of being able to operate in spaces where you've had the opportunity to be open, to thrive, to grow, to be forward thinking and proactive, a lot of HR professionals do not have that. They just don't have that. They have leaders who are pretty stuck. So, what advice and what support would you offer to HR professionals who are being held back, and are struggling to kind of move this agenda forward of progressive HR?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a couple things. I think, one, so I want to just acknowledge what you say and kind of own that. Like, there are many practitioners who are working in environments that the environments will hold them back. Whether it's a leader who doesn't buy into modern HR, a CEO who will never resource the team in a way that it can do anything other than transact. There's lots of limiting factors that are beyond the control of the practitioner. So, let's recognize that, but let's also not put that on the HR people's shoulders. Even if you have the most innovative leader in the world, if you have an environment above that person that is blocking them, doesn't believe in their vision, doesn't support their vision, they're going to fail, and they're not going to be able to operate at that level. So let's just kind of establish that as a baseline. The good news is, I think for practitioners who are in those environments, even if you may be limited into what you can, introduce and roll out and drive within your organization, you're not limited to your own individual growth and development. And so I think we're in this golden age of community in HR right now, whether it's HR open source, hacking HR, disrupt HR. There are so many different, the Amplify Accelerator. There's so many different platforms that you can plug into as a practitioner to find kinship and peer-to-peer learning and support and collaboration and growth in those environments. So even if you're in an environment that is kind of stifling, right? They're old school, they have no appetite to grow beyond that. If you have a personal ambition and initiative to grow and to surround yourself with more progressive minded peers, you can do that pretty easily. And frankly, at some point, maybe you'll do that, and then you'll say, I've outgrown this. I can't. I don't want to just do this anymore. My capabilities are now my thinking. My capabilities have transcended the role that I'm in right now, and I've got to find a new role. And luckily for you, the market for HR right now has never been hotter. I haven't seen anything like it. So if you're in an environment that doesn't value you, doesn't give you the opportunity to to grow and stretch yourself a little bit and create more people-centric programs, it might be time for you to leave.
Absolutely. And I think You just actually answered Marley's question. So the questions are starting to come in across the chat. So Marley was asking, yeah, when should HR professionals see the writing on the wall, red flags, and when should they lean in and push through?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that, right? If you're in an environment where you are being, capped, you're not able to grow, you come with ideas and they continually get shot down, there's no budget to invest in any development programs or growth. Your programs perhaps even get, belittled by CEOs or leadership team that don't buy into what you're doing. Those are all huge red flags, and to an extent, there's only so much influence you have as a practitioner, and some environments are just old school environments, right? And there's nothing that any practitioner is going to do to change that environment. It's just deeply embedded. When you see those signals, when you see those signs, that's when I think it's time to go. And there's a lot of privilege in that statement, so let me own that as well. Like, it's not like anybody can just pick up and move jobs anytime. So you have to obviously honor your own individual circumstances. But but if you're in that environment and you're getting no leadership, no mentorship, no support, no guidance, and you're trying to do the right thing by employees and you're getting pushback, or worse, getting kind of unethical direction on things around employee programs, those are all big red flags that it's probably time to find something new.
Yes, thank you for that, Lars. Marley, I hope that Lars answered your question. But I want to say this as a recruiter, though, Lars, from your experience, like you just said, the market for open HR positions is one that you've never seen before. But how do you support HR professionals as they are going through this process of moving to another organization? Because obviously, HR professionals leave an organization for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And even when that organization is now recruiting to fill that position, that doesn't mean that the organization is willing to make the change that is necessary to support the next HR professional who is looking for a role that's going to give them all of those things that we talked about before. So how do you work in that space as a recruiter?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that there are some environments, and a lot of this even comes down to the relationship between a manager and an employee, right? You may just not connect for whatever reason. Your work style doesn't connect with that manager. And if you don't, it's going to be hard for you to thrive in that environment, and you're probably going to want to leave. Now, somebody else may come in and they might have a work style that actually is completely congruent with that manager, and they're going to thrive in that role. It doesn't make that manager necessarily bad or that organization necessarily bad. It just wasn't a fit for you. And so that's such an individual circumstance that it's hard to kind of paint a broad answer to that, right? Like, I think you have to, as a job candidate in this market, you want to ask about the environment. You want to ask about the team. You want to ask about the talent and people roadmap for the next year. You want to ask about the budget, right? Like, it's one thing to say, we really value people. Show me your budget. That'll help me understand, do you really kind of value people? What's your development budget? How are you approaching how you're going to actually support teams to be successful? So I think those are the kind of questions that you need to ask in the interview process when you're considering a new role, and then also try to talk to some of your peers in the role. And that may not always be an organic aspect of the interview process. I think particularly in these days when a lot of companies are trying to streamline the interview process as much as possible for hiring velocity. But don't be afraid to say, like, I'd love to talk to some of my peers, in this role, just to kind of learn, like, what do they think about the role and the team? And if you're not given that opportunity, that may actually be a red flag.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing those tips and those gems. I want to say, like, as we consider what the future of work looks like from a hybrid perspective and how we redefine HR from this perspective, what are some of the things that you are seeing showing up in terms of how HR professionals show up now with this, for lack of a better word, new normal?
Yeah, I mean, look, so much of our world is different today, right? That's like a great understatement of the day, right? In terms of the world of work broadly. I think for practitioners, a lot of things are happening, and they're happening at the same time. We're moving away from kind of rigid, formulaic, playbook-driven people practices to much more agile and nimble and flexible and hybrid practices.
Mm-hmm.
That is not how most of us are wired. That is not how most of us came up in the field, right? We're came up with like, here's our one benefits program, like here's our one way of doing things. And now there are multiple versions of that. Mm-hmm. So there's that. There's different conversations that are happening around, mental health and support, and certainly, building inclusive organizations and infusing diversity, equity, inclusion in terms of the entire employee life cycle. There's that component as well. We're thinking about that. We certainly should be thinking about that in very different ways than we were even a year and a half ago. So all these things are happening at the same time. And I think the unique, burden, frankly, on HR is that, when you talk about all the stress points of the last, whether it's the pandemic or social justice and racism or having kids at home from school, right, or elder care or mental health struggles, we are in this unique position of dealing with all of those as individuals, dealing with all of those, leading our kind of leadership teams through navigating that, leading our teams, our HR and people teams through that, and then the entire employee population. So we're actually getting it on like 4 or 5 different levels. And that's been a lot to carry. So, I mean, burnout is also rampant in HR right now because we've just been carrying the weight of all of these things for so long. And I've recently, my last Fast Company piece, I kind of called, the field of HR, the Department of Plus One, because so much of these new things that have come, they've just been put on our plate. And we're often not given the resources or the budgets to accompany that extra work. And so it's just another cause of burnout in the field.
Yeah, definitely. So how do we move forward?
So we move forward by kind of understanding our worth and our value. We have to be able to advocate for the budget and the resources to be able to drive some of these programs. Like if it's, we have to, and I say we, this is probably more narrowed in on HR leadership, but when we're getting all these things added to our plate, we've got to make sure that we're positioned in a way to successfully do those things. If not, it's going to be just another thing of like, we're set up to fail. Because now we're being given these 3 new tasks with no additional resources or budget, and we're just expected to figure that out. And in the old days, we probably would just take that on and say, okay, we'll figure it out. We'll be good, troopers. No, we've got to push back and say, hey, look, we're going to do this. This is the budget that we need to do this effectively. These are the resources that we need to do it effectively. So that's one. The second piece is, it's never been more important for practitioners to really invest in their network equity. That is absolutely essential right now. You've got a hard job, you've got a lonely job, you've got a very emotionally difficult job at times. If you don't have those support networks, those peer networks that you can lean in onto to help you navigate through some of those stickier situations, it's a lot to carry by yourself. And so I think really investing in your own, network equity, investing in your own growth and development, and really advocating for your team and your function are 3 things that I think are really important as practitioners kind of navigating this new whatever it is.
Yeah, definitely. I think you've made some really great points. And as you talk about networking, community building, your acumen, let's talk a little bit about your Amplify program. This program, this community that you have put together, why did you create it? See the need for it? Who is it for?
Yeah, so it's it's interesting. If you would have asked me in January if I would be doing this, I would have probably scratched my head. But it was really, in a lot of ways, it was the evolution from the book. Like after people, I kind of mentioned at the beginning of the show, my personal mission is accelerating innovation in HR, and I've done that through a range of different capacities. But a lot of it has been kind of not as proactive, right? Like I can write a book, I can record podcasts, I can put content out there, I can hopefully spark ideas, but it's a bit more passive than I would like. And so I think when the book came out, I got a lot of feedback from people saying, hey, my eyes are open now, and I want to continue to invest in myself and my own development as a future chief people officer. Where can I go to do that?
Right.
And I didn't have an answer for them, to be honest with you. And so when I didn't, I said, I'm kind of, there's a real need. And I'm, perhaps uniquely positioned to do something about this. And so that was really what led to creating the Accelerator platform. The original, element of it was a cohort program. So the cohort programs are 4-week intensive mix of kind of synchronous and asynchronous learning
Right.
on modern HR and people practices. And then since it's grown from that to kind of on-demand courses, there's a paid community, there's a job board, there's an open source learning lab that's tied to that as well, because I'm still a huge advocate for open source practices. And really it's for people who aspire to be chief people officers. So it's the kind of personas, if you will, of students so far have usually been either people in their first head of people role,
Right.
people who might be a number 2 to a CPO or a CHRO, and that's kind of the seat where they plan to go next. Or the third would be usually functional, either heads or in some cases leads,
Right.
who want to kind of round out their knowledge beyond that specific functional area. And so the course has been tremendous. Like, it's been so satisfying to see the to be directly involved with each course and all the students, but then also to see this thriving alumni network come from that. Like the whole idea behind this course is community is embedded in everything. So this isn't just like a course. Like most courses are, it's a moment in time, it's a certification, it's a whatever it is. But when you hit the end of it, it's over. And then you're figuring out on your own, like, how do I then bring this stuff into my work?
Right.
And the cohorts are designed where there's a community that you're a part of forever. There's an alumni network that you're a part of forever. Now there's been over 100 students that have gone through the first 3 cohorts, and I just opened up the Delta cohort, the 4th one, which will be in February of next year. But it's been amazing, and it allows me to also bring in some of the people leaders who I really admire, who I think are changing the game.
I was going to ask you before you go into that. Yeah, like, who are some of these people that you brought in? Because I see a lot.
Yeah, so I mean, people from Caitlin Holloway at 776 used to be the head of people at Reddit, Claude Silver at VaynerMedia, Katie Burke at HubSpot, Tiff Stevenson at Patreon, Aaron Thomas at Upwork. I mean, there's so many people, and it's I feel very fortunate because they're people who are friends and who I've worked with and collaborated with, but I really admire their leadership role in the space. And so the opportunity to bring the students and connect them with them for fireside chats and direct learning, it's amazing because I know how valuable their ideas and approaches are as it relates to kind of modern HR leadership. And so the ability to expose them to a broader, cohort of accelerator students is phenomenal, because it's allowing them to help kind of proactively shape the next generation of HR leaders.
Amazing. And so what did the courses look like? Like, tell us like some of the content that you're covering in those courses, what people can expect as they interact. I see the comment saying, Sherry says, your book is excellent. Kalila's so good, Lars.
Thank you.
So we're getting lots of comments here. So just tell us, like, what can people expect?
So the courses are broken down. It's a 4-week course, and every week tackles a component that's, to me, fundamental to modern HR. So the 4 modules are diversity, equity, and inclusion, leadership, people analytics, and HR tech, and innovation. And so for each of those weeks, we have a guest instructor come in and do a guest presentation. I have a range of asynchronous materials that I've curated, from past guest instructors to white papers, research, podcasts, videos, all kinds of stuff, so that each week is kind of an immersive dive into that topic. And then there's 2 live synchronous sessions each week. The first one is with the guest instructor. So that's where, we have their presentation, and then we do a live AMA with the guest instructor, so the students have the opportunity to ask questions. And then the second one, we do breakout groups. So we break the cohort into smaller groups where they have group discussions, where they talk about, things that they're tackling in their role today on that particular topic. And then the back end to all of this, there's a Amplify Accelerator Slack community. And so every cohort has their own designated Slack channel within the broader community, where they interact and share ideas and collaborate, throughout the course. So, and then the Slack channel and kind of membership in the community extends beyond the course. So what makes it really unique, I think, is the cohort membership comes with lifetime access to the community. And so that's a huge value there. But then the second piece, which I'm really excited about, is all of the cohort students will continue to get access to future guest instructor presentations, because it was important to me to have kind of a long tail learning component. So the value of the course extends years beyond the actual 4-week program, because you'll continue to have access to both the community and future guest instructors that haven't even happened yet.
What? That is amazing, Lars. Did you ever, was that ever your plan for it to this kind of like develop this way?
I mean, I had ideas certainly, but I'd be lying if I said I had this like fully planned out. The coolest thing about kind of building in public the way that I've been approaching the cohorts is that the cohorts themselves are actually helping me design the program. So, you know, from the alpha course that we had in May, like they were instrumental in helping, like, okay, like this aspect is too long, this thing needs more time, we need more resources here. Through the Bravo and the Charlie courses, you know, I get feedback literally on a week-to-week basis, and I make adjustments on the fly, week to week, inside the course based on that feedback, because it's really important to me that I want to be able to optimize everyone's experience. And because this is a, you know, cohorts aren't necessarily new, but they're fairly new to HR.
Yeah.
And it was really important to me that while I had an idea of what I wanted to create, I want to make sure that I'm continually refining that with input from the students so that I can make sure to maximize their experience.
Nice. And I think that your audience will greatly appreciate that as you continue to develop and grow the Amplify program. Thank you so much for sharing that. Like, and for actually taking the time to create it and be that person in our HR community who sees the need to help our HR professionals develop and grow, because we don't have a lot of that. It's books are one thing, going to college or universities, taking a SHRM course or a CIPD is like one thing, but like what you have put together here, all embracing of like, let me help you develop into the next chief people officer for your organization. The people that you have in place to support that community and help you develop and grow those people is something short of amazing. So thank you, Lars.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
That and putting it together. Absolutely. What does the future look like for Lars Schmidt?
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly leaning into this accelerator platform. I'll be continuing to scale that and probably have at least a half dozen cohorts in 2022. I'm going to start building more on-demand courses as well. So for people that, you know, maybe don't have the time or the budget or resources to attend a cohort, I want to create more accessible, you know, offerings for those individuals as well. So that's something that I'm in the process of developing now. And then beyond that, I don't know, to be honest with you, like I'm not one of those people that has like a 5-year plan. I work in kind of 1 year, maybe 18 months, you know, cycles. And that gives me the opportunity to do new things like this accelerator platform. So we'll see. I mean, it's such a fascinating time in our space right now. I'm just, you know, enjoying the privilege and the opportunity that I have to be able to kind of shine the light on it in the way that I do and that I can. And so I'm grateful for that. And then, yeah, I think for me, the business is, it's a lifestyle business. So I can make sure that I'm also prioritizing being a dad and a husband and, you know, making sure that my life is centered around that and these other things fit into it in a complementary way.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, how do you strike that work-life balance? So you kind of answered that for me. So thank you so much for sharing. Where can our audience find you on social media? How can they tap into your podcast and tap into the Accelerator program?
Yeah, so, you know, amplifytalent.com is the website. You can find the podcast, the book, the accelerator, search, all the stuff that I do is all centered on that website. I'm pretty active on Twitter. You can find me there at Lars, and Lars Schmidt on LinkedIn. So
awesome. Thank you so much. Any final words, comments, recommendations that you have for our audience today as we talk about the importance of redefining HR and what that looks like for them, how they move forward?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the one thing that I would just say to all of your listeners right now and viewers is just, you know, practicing self-care has never been more important or practitioners. Like, you're carrying a lot. You've been carrying a lot for a long time. And so it's really important to do two things. One, really be really good and disciplined about creating boundaries, at work, so that you're not just full on all the time. And two, one of those boundaries should be around creating your own developmental time. So whether it is, at a bare minimum, blocking 1 hour every week in your calendar, and you're using that hour to listen to podcasts, watch shows like this, read articles, whatever it might be. That developmental time and that ability for you to invest in yourself is so important, especially in this increasingly complex world that we're in. It's going to allow you to add more value to your company and your role. But if you don't create that space and defend it, it's not going to just happen. So you've got to make sure that you prioritize, your own investments in yourself.
Great advice, Lars. Thank you so much for sharing. And with that said, the audience agree with you. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today, share your knowledge, share your experience, talk about your program, tell us about your book, and how we can continue to interact with you and learn more about you and what you do. So thank you so much for your contribution also to the HR community. It's greatly appreciated. Please continue doing the great work that you're doing. Don't give up. You're doing a great thing. And I know sometimes it may be hard, especially in the moments where you may get frustrated, but don't give up. You're doing awesome work, Lars, and we appreciate you. And the audience clearly shares their love for you, appreciating you as well.
Well, I appreciate it, Julie. And there's no giving up in me. There's too much work to be done.
Done, yeah.
I'm having too much fun with it. And there's too much, there's so much opportunity for how we can be supporting each other and really be in this once in a generation position to change this field. So I have boundless excitement towards that. So I appreciate all the work you're doing as well. To further these conversations and extend these practices into broader audiences. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Lars. I appreciate it. So, guys, we have had an amazing conversation about redefining HR. I hope that you found this conversation useful and that you have been able to take away with you something that will help you to think about how you are going to redefine and find your space in this place that we call HR. If you have not read this book, please go get your copy. If you are not following Lars, please make sure you follow him and reach out if you have any questions whatsoever. We are all here as a community to support one another the best way that we can. And as Lars said, I have to totally agree. This is a most wonderful time for us to be in our profession, to actually be here at the helm of being able to see how we can move this profession forward in the most productive way possible so that everyone benefits. And for those of you who may have lost your love for HR, I hope that you do find it again through conversations like this, and that you get reinvigorated and step back into the ring and help us move the HR profession forward in a positive light. So we are at the end of, coming to the end of November. We're coming to the end of the year, Lars. Can you believe that it's gone so quickly?
It has, yeah.
Time has flown so fast. There will be no Magnifying HR Voices next week because I need to take a little break. But I will be back the following week, and our guest will be Sarah Knoll. And Sarah and I both share something very in common, which is that we both have ADHD. So we are HR professionals with ADHD, and we're going to be sharing our experiences of what it's like to be HR professionals in this space, doing what we do, having this neurodiversity, and what it means for organizations when you hire HR professionals who are neurodiverse. How do you take us? How do you accept us? How do you embrace us? How do you help us to develop and grow so that we can give you the best support and services that you need for your organization? So next week, short break, and then we come back to discuss neurodiversity in HR. So you enjoy that. So have a great week, everyone. Take care of yourself. Continue to be great. Remember, you are awesome. And no matter what you're going through, community is always here for you. Thanks again.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for having me, Julie.
You're welcome, Lars.